Now I'm going to explain my three-agent model of the human brain. And the first agent is the thinker. And the thinker is the general problem solver. The doer is the agent that controls the body and also has feelings and emotions. And the experiencer is the agent that creates the model of the world that's required by the good regulator theorem. Now, the evidence for the thinker and doer is that they are consistent with well-established, experimentally derived models of cognition in two different fields. In the field of psychology, there's dual process theory. And the way that psychologists demonstrate this dual process theory is by looking for a question where the intuitive answer is the wrong answer. And people who are using their doer to answer that question will just take the easy answer, which is the intuitive answer, and give the wrong answer to the question. People who use the thinker to actually think about the problem will give the correct answer by thinking about what the correct answer is. And a lot of these things had to do with probability. It turns out we have lousy intuitions when it comes to probability. We often think the wrong answer is true when we're just using an intuitive thought. That's why casinos are so successful. Now, in the field of neuroscience, there's a model that's called the action-outcome stimulus-response model. And action-outcome refers to the fact that you're trying to achieve a given outcome, and you're trying to figure out what action will get you that outcome. That's problem solving. That's trying to solve the problem of getting that outcome and figuring out what action will do it. So that's the thinker. The stimulus response is the doer. Now, given a thinker and a doer, the experiencer is required by the good regulator theorem. And a model of the major connections between the agents is shown here. The thinker is the general problem solver, and in addition to solving problems, the thinker can also produce thoughtful speech. For example, when you're reporting the result of the sum of two-digit numbers, your thinker computed those results, and then your thinker is using thoughtful speech to communicate the answer to somebody else. The doer controls the body, and it also has feelings and emotions. And the doer is the agent that produces automatic speech. And it turns out that most of our speech is automatic. If you're not aware of the next word that's going to come out of your mouth during the time that you're saying it, that's automatic speech. And the experiencer and the doer together are very capable of having a long conversation purely with automatic speech. Then the experiencer is the agent that creates the conceptual and the sensory model of the world. And this model of the world has to include the body, because my body is part of the world. And in addition, it contains the goals of all the agents, and it contains the self-models of the four agents. Now, there's three agents shown in this diagram, but the human brain as a whole is an agent. So there's a self-model for the human as a whole, and then the self-model for each of these three sub-agents. And the way that the experiencer builds up this conceptual and sensory model of the world is by understanding its inputs. So in the sensory realm, if I understand the sensory input that's coming in, I can update my model of the world with that sensory input in mind. And similarly, when I'm updating my conceptual model of the world, by listening to language coming from other people and taking the information they've given me there and update my conceptual model of the world with what they've told me. Now, if you don't understand it, then you say you don't understand what somebody's saying, and that you have to either ask them or maybe use your thinker to try to figure out what they say and try to figure out a way of making that fit into your model of the world. Similarly, in the sensory area, magicians confound us constantly there because they do things that we don't understand. How in the world can that bird disappear out of nothing? That's an example of not understanding the input. The other thing that the experiencer understands is intuition. My definition of intuition is that intuition is understanding how the world works without thinking. So if you don't have to involve your thinker and you just intuitively know how the world works, that's intuition coming from the experiencer. One thing the experiencer doesn't understand is instincts. The doer is the agent that understands instincts. And my definition of instincts is that instincts is understanding what to do in the world without thinking. And the doer is the one that does things, so he understands instincts. Now here are some other connections between the three agents. There's two kinds of attention. There's top-down attention, and this is where the thinker or the doer are telling the experiencer, pay attention to that object. For example, in meditation, trying to pay attention to your breath, that's where the thinker is telling the experiencer to pay attention to the breath. Bottom-up attention is where the experiencer chooses the object that's going to be attended to, and it might be that it's a novel object that was unexpected, something happened that it didn't expect, so it will bring that to the attention of the thinker and doer in case they have to do something about that. The other example is that if, for example, I have a goal of eating ice cream. If my doer has a goal of eating ice cream and somebody puts some ice cream down near me, the experiencer is going to say, hey, there's ice cream there. And then my doer can go and pick it up and eat it. So that's bottom-up attention. Now, the experiencer also experiences the internal voice and visualizations of the thinker. The thinker generates the internal voice that we hear in our head, or the visualizations. Some people are more visual, some people are more verbal. But whatever it is, visual or verbal, it's the thinker that's generating that, and we can experience that with the experiencer. Similarly, the experiencer experiences the emotions and feelings of the doer. So the doer generates the emotions, and the experiencer is the agent that experiences those. Now, in addition, the doer needs to tell the experiencer about any planned motions of the body. Because if we move our body, the sensory inputs are going to change, and the experiencer has to know how they're going to change so that it doesn't think something weird is happening. Now, the source of goals for the three agents starts with evolution, and the evolutionary goal for the thinker is just to solve problems. Now, the evolutionary goals for the doer are many. The three major categories of goals for the doer are survive, reproduce, and be social. We're very social animals, as you can demonstrate by this gathering here. And so the doer has those three major goals. There's lots of minor goals associated with that, like get water, get food, get shelter, things like that. So those are the three major categories. Now, why is there only one goal for the thinker? It's because the thinker has been designed by evolution to handle the cases that the doer can't handle. So if the environment is changing too rapidly, the doer might not have the instinctual ways of handling the new environment, and the thinker can come in and think about it and solve the problem of how to achieve those goals that the doer has in this new environment. And then finally, the experiencer has the goal of creating the model of the world and also directing attention as required. Now, agents can also create new goals. For example, my thinker creates a lot of conceptual goals for me. One of my conceptual goals is to always be right. And another goal that my thinker created was, in high school, I decided I wanted to become a physicist. Now, to achieve that goal of becoming a physicist, you have to create a lot of small sub goals for that, like going to MIT, going to Stanford, doing all the classes that I needed to do to achieve the goal of getting that PhD in physics. And the other way that goals are created is by copying them. The doer's goals of survive, reproducing, and being social can be copied into the thinker, and the thinker will then adopt those goals. The doer can also copy that goal of always being right, and when somebody tells me that I'm wrong, it can get angry. So that's the way that the goals are created for the three different agents. Now I'm going to talk about the self-models for the agents. And since the thinker mostly works in the conceptual realm, the thinker is the I, me, my concept. That's who I am. Now, the doer is mostly working in the sensory realm, and it controls the body. So the doer's self-model is the body itself. And finally, the experiencer doesn't do anything in that world out there. So you might think it doesn't need a self-model, but it does, and I'll explain that later. And finally, the human as an agent will have some combination of the self-models of the three agents shown above. So the human agent will be some combination of these three self-models.